So my job is to get people to recognize a lot of the quote emotions that you have. Well, when you emote, it's a verb. Just because you felt the feeling doesn't mean that you have an obligation to choose to emote what you've learned to emote. You can choose something different. And that's, I think, where the rubber meets the road. And it was at that point when I recognized you have the power to choose that I stopped becoming a victim and I started practicing self-mastery. If I could give the listener any tool right now, the tool would be, even though you don't realize the tremendous amount of support that you have because you're not seeing it, we're all here and we're waiting for you. Don't give up, man. Grind. Yeah, you don't see your value right now. You're seeing yourself through a very self-critical lens.
I'm Art Blanchford, and this is Life in Transition. Welcome back to the Life in Transition podcast. I'm really excited to have with us today a new friend and Philly brother, we found that already, Dennis Procopio, who is all about helping men live a life of purpose in the second half. And as you know, that's super important to me as well. So I'm really glad that we found each other, Dennis, and big welcome to the Life in Transition podcast.
Man, thank you. And thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So jumping in here, Dennis, what do you feel right now is a significant major transition that you've been through in your life?
Well, I started out my life a little bit behind the eight ball. Now, I know everybody's got their story. So,
Right.
I'm not in competition with the guy who got his arms and legs blown off in Iraq or whatever. I know everybody's got their story, right? But I'll just say, for anybody out here that can relate to this, I've been to 24 different schools. And no, I wasn't an Army brat. It was just one of those things where the parents couldn't figure it out. Child of divorce. Physical abuse to the extreme in every environment I was in. I'll just go on record and say no shame in any other dudes out there who have been the childhood victims of physical abuse or sexual molestation. Been there, done that, sucks, and it's your job to get through that. So there's been a lot. There was a lot of really bad stuff. So if this were a football game, in keeping with your first half, second half analogy, first half sucked.
Can I pause on there for a second? Because I just want to unpack a little bit when you said, hey, there's no shame in other dudes that are going through this. For all of us, whatever it was when we were a certain age, at least till a certain age, we thought was normal.
Yeah.
So what would you consider, like, when did it start that you understood it was as abuse, not just a normal childhood? And what's the definition of that for you?
Wow.
Like, when did you notice that, oh, this isn't just a normal childhood, this is actually abuse? And what does that look like?
That's a tough one. I think what happens with people who are abused is we assume that the things are happening to us because we're doing something wrong and that it's our fault. For instance, kids who are, whose parents are getting divorced, it's often the case that they think it's because of something they've done wrong.
Right.
So if I think back, I have memories of having been, for instance, potty trained, quote unquote, by having my head slammed on the tiles in the bathroom at like 2.5 years old.
Wow.
And
so an adult would actually take your head and like smack it against the wall.
Yeah. I'm trying not to throw anybody under the bus here. So I'm just keeping it vague. But a guardian thought that was appropriate, South Philly, in the 70s, that was appropriate training. You don't piss in the bed, you piss here, And so the result is that I have this deeply branded memory of what the tiles looked like because I associated it with like this head trauma and having this happen, So that was one of the earliest memories that I had. Or seeing my mom get choked out until her face was blue and she was probably going to like die, and me saying mommy's turning blue, which was probably the only thing that kept her alive. So at that time I was innocent and I didn't understand that this wasn't okay, but I was learning that it was normal. And if you come from a household, like I come from immigrants, so if you come from a household where it's, don't speak against the family and don't go to the police, you keep it inside, or, you never contradict the father or any of that real, Italian stuff. You shut your mouth and you just say, yeah, we all went through it. Just it's, my business being called Man Up. It's ironic that was the idea. Just man up. You're 7 now. Shut your mouth and just man up. And so when I finally did start to realize, hey, I don't think this is okay. Honestly, I don't think I fully got it until my late 20s, which is right around the time that I start bringing guys into my coaching culture. And I look back and go, I think a lot of that was really wrong. I think I might have been a victim of abuse.
So I wanted to bring that out because I think that's true for a lot of, especially men, right? That we think, hey, this is just sort of
how
this
it goes.
is the water we grew up in. It's how it goes, and it's not that big a deal. But it's, there's, it is. I mean, hitting somebody or banging somebody's head against the wall, or, there's a lot of things that we might have considered normal, and it's not about being a victim, but it's just recognizing that was not healthy behavior, and very damaging to us. And if we want to come through it, we have to also heal those parts of ourselves, right? Acknowledge the damage and heal those, so we're not perpetrating it in a worst case or sabotaging our life because of it. All right. So yeah, really important to understand that and to realize, and I'll add, it's also one of the things that I had a hard time to learn. If you see, like you talked about with your mom, right? If you see someone that you really love being abused, that's going to be just as traumatic as being physically or sexually or emotionally abused yourself.
Absolutely. I mean, it's basically, Batman's origin story, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So this was, you said you were asking about the transition that you've been through, and you said, okay, I started a little bit behind the 8 ball. I had this rough upbringing.
Right. And so I realized somewhere along the way that my behaviors as an adolescent were expressions of two things. One, I had been hurt and it had affected my sense of self-confidence and my identity. So I was continuing to act like someone who deserved punishment while still wanting some of the best things in life. So it was wanting the world to provide for me, but also manifesting negativity because I believed that I deserved negativity. And so it became a self-fulfilling prophecy. And also, the worst thing in the world that can happen to somebody who has been a victim of abuse is to then imitate the behaviors that they've learned, where, as you say, you perpetuate the negative cycle by, you're the kid who gets beat by your dad, and now you become the dad who beats your kid, and you hate yourself for it.
Hurt people. Yeah.
Yeah, hurt, exactly. And so the switch, the transition, I'd love to say, and then one day Jesus just flew down and said, "You're healed," or whatever, right? Or I just had this epiphany: I could be more than this, and I clicked to my heels, and I was better. Right. No, I became an alcoholic. I got into drugs. I became a womanizer, and I started going to jail. I became a recidivist. I was exactly the person who starts out as a little, pussy kid who gets sand kicked in his face and turns into like some Jersey Shore freaking raging hormone, I'll kill anybody who looks at me wrong guy. Absolute character change. Overcompensated 100%. Started lifting weights, got stupid jacked, had been training taekwondo, boxing, Philly, you're going to box, wrestling, PA, you're going to wrestle, so I was a physical threat. And on top of that, I was handsome and I was creative. So I was out there getting attention from all the worst women, the hot girls with the daddy didn't love me thing, which meant that I was competing for them with other guys who were like me. And what I should have been doing was like bro hugging these guys out and talking about our shared trauma. But instead, we were going to war with each other out there in the streets, and it ended me up in jail. Jail, and not just jail, but freaking Rikers Island in the 90s, which is pause for emphasis. Right. That was where I had my realization, dude, you're on the wrong track. You're going in the wrong direction.
How did that realization come to you?
Gee, I guess it was somewhere between guys wanting to stab me every day and other people sitting around either reading the Bible or, practicing Islam and going to the masjid and realizing that there was a significant energetic difference between the guys who took ownership of their mistakes and turned to some sort of spiritual practice versus the guys who just stayed in that pattern. And
so you had been in that pattern, obviously, up to this point.
Yeah.
But it was this contrast in the can. It was this contrast, like, oh, wait a minute.
Yeah.
There's people that are perpetuating the same energy that I'm perpetuating right now. And that's going to be a really hard life for me going forward. And then there's there's other people in here that are starting to say, hey, what can I do about it? Right. The serenity prayer, if you talk about spiritual practice, right?
Right. What can I change? What can I change?
Right.
Right. And how do I accept what I can't change with grace? And how do I, take initiative on the things that I can change? That is exactly where it clicked for me. You're not a victim.
Right.
You're not in here with a bunch of criminals. Dog, you are a criminal.
Right. Yeah.
You're a criminal.
I'm still curious, like to peel that back one step further, because, there's a lot of people in there that will never have that realization. Or maybe they will, but maybe it won't be till their deathbed, or maybe, it'll be very much later, but something. So what is it like, if we look at the anatomy of a transition, like what is it? Like, when did that click? Like, what was the thing? What was the conversation in your mind? What was it that you told yourself all of a sudden when you had that realization? Because obviously up to that point, you hadn't had it.
I understand what you're saying. And you're reminding me, this is going to seem like a tangent, but we've got time, right?
Yeah. That's why we have podcasts, have an authentic conversation, right? And see where it takes us.
Yeah. So later, let me do it this way. When I was in the Bosse's Cultural Arts Center in Syosset, New York, which was an art school, and I was there for acting until I switched my major to art, which would eventually lead to me going to a prestigious school. And
So this was after prison or before?
No, prison happened afterward. I started, I was on a really good track. Okay. So I went from rags to whatever. I went from bad stuff to good stuff on paper. I started doing the things that guys do. I got a scholarship to Cooper Union for the advancement of science and art, which is a full 4-year scholarship. I racked up a whole bunch of other scholarship monies at School of Visual Art and all of these really prestigious places. And for a minute there, it was like kid from the hood does good, and abandoned by his family, total sob story, emancipated minor at 15 years old, living homeless illegally in a trailer on the side of his bus driver's house in, West Babylon, Long Island in 1987, 88, graduates high school and is going to go off and do big things. What a winner.
Right.
And then I went off to do big things until all of my stuff caught up with me. But somewhere in my training, I had been in I had been in an acting class where one of the assignments was to be improvisational.
Mhm.
So the teacher would have you stand on the stage and ask everybody to take turns doing something spontaneous. So
Right.
you'd all do some goofy thing that was as desperately spontaneous as possible. And then she said, I want you to do the same thing, but before you do the spontaneous action, I want you to locate the impulse to do the spontaneous action. And I want you to stop just before you do it. And that was a total head trip. Yeah, right? That's simple but profound. And so that led right. It's a vortex.
Yeah.
And that led me to the identity crisis question. How much of what am I doing consciously, and how much am I doing subconsciously? And if it's subconscious, then by definition, I'm not aware of it. So I started discovering that I had to make assumptions about my subconscious drives based on what I was manifesting. So if I'm seeing crap coming out of the kitchen, I must be ordering crap in some like I'm drunk dialing Amazon or whatever, and I'm ordering this stuff and I just don't remember it. So the way that I had to answer your question now, the way that I had the realization that I needed to do something different wasn't some aha moment where I realized I'm this and I should be this, I'm bad and I could be good. It was, I see, and this is why I think mentorship is so important. I see men getting results that I would like to get. I need to pay attention to what they're doing.
Right.
And so monkey see, monkey do, I started imitating the actions, language, and behavior of men who were my idea of successful, even if that just meant that they were successfully getting through jail,
Right.
in an optimal way or whatever. And that was the pivot point for me. And it was the results that justified my faith in the process.
This episode of the Life in Transition podcast is brought to you by Midlife Transition Mastery. If you have reached midlife and you are successful, you have checked all the boxes, you've done everything you thought you should do, and especially pleasing everybody else, doing what you think everyone else needs you to do, but you still feel like something's missing, like you're coming up empty, feeling alone, feeling misguided or lost. Midlife Transition Mastery Explorer community is for you. Here we will build authentic community. We will learn about the 8 steps to mastering midlife transition. And we will learn and execute living life with no regrets in our second half. Please check out the community on lifeintransition.online/MLTM, Midlife Transition Mastery. And I look forward to seeing you around the fire in this community. I mean, if we go all the way back to that improv, which I love that improv teacher, I mean, what a great question. I mean, you got to have an experience and therefore an epiphany of what Viktor Frankl talks about, right? Between stimulus and response, there is a gap. It may be very, very small, so small that most of the time we don't ever recognize that it's there.
Right.
But there is a gap. And she brought that gap out, right? So she made you aware of this gap. And then in that gap is our power to choose.
Somewhere between signal and noise.
Exactly.
There's a moment of infinite zero time presence. And when we meditate, we attempt to access that state that transcends.
Yeah.
I know it sounds kind of wacky, but that transcends the time-space continuum, which is to say that flips a switch between being the avatar in the simulation here, Neo in the Matrix, and being letting the higher mind take the wheel, so to speak,
Right.
because it knows what you need.
Right.
And
so you took that awareness, like that came back to you when you're sitting there when you're in prison. You're like, okay, wait a minute. There's some guys that are trying to kill each other every day, and that's the path I'm on right now. And there's some guys that are not trying to kill each other every day. And what do they have?
There's also, so I have this thing that I always say in Man Up Life coaching, which is that all judgment is self-judgment. Mm-hmm. So if you judge others, you're judging yourself. If you're like, oh, that dude's a dick, well, you're probably a dick. Or that's what you think of yourself. Mm-hmm. That dude needs to work out. Well, you probably need to work out. Right. And so if you judge,
I want to dig into that for a second, because it's not just, hey, Alex, my son just walked in. It's visiting today. Oh, okay. I'll catch up to him in a minute. It's not just that you're judging yourself. I mean, you are, but a lot of people say, well, that's not true because I'm fit. And why would I say that if somebody else isn't fit, but there's still a part of us that thinks we're not fit enough. We're not good enough. Right. So even if it's a different scale, there's still, like anytime I'm judging somebody else, I'm judging that part of myself or that shame part I have myself about that, regardless of where I am on the scale.
Yeah. And so let me not make a mental note of where we launched so we can circle back to it, but just so that I can give that piece credence.
Yeah.
It's not just the person who's overweight who judges other people who are overweight. It's the David Goggins of the world. It's the Michael Jordans of the world, the Kobe Bryants of the world, rest in peace, who have this competency addiction where, because their self-esteem is so low because of this extreme self-judgment, which usually comes from a judging paternalistic figure. I mean, in my experience as a coach for men, right, you've got this dad on your shoulder, this criticizing boomer, or this, Asian father. All of my Asian parents know what time it is when I talk about this stuff. It's like, you got an A, why didn't you get an A plus? Oh, right. You got a 99, why didn't you get 100? Right. Oh, you got a scholarship to a local college, why didn't you get one to Harvard? And so these guys who have this competency addiction, who seem to be winners because they're interested in being the best they can, what's actually happening is they're trying to be as far from loser as possible. And whoever number one is, they have to get so much further ahead of that person to feel like they have breathing room. And it's exhausting.
Right. Right. No, exactly. It's exhausting. And they're still judging themselves, even if it on the, let's say on the outside, looks very different than the guy they're judging.
Yeah. Everybody else would say, oh no, he's not judging anybody else for being losers because he's a total winner. No, he's still judging him. He's holding himself to a standard that says you're not unconditionally loved and accepted. You're not good enough as you are. And we do that as men. We equate value to performance.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So circling that back around as the mental note, right? So now you're in prison.
Yeah.
And you see these guys and you're judging them.
Mm-hmm. And I want to make the note that I'm in jail, not prison, because no, it's okay. Yeah. But prison implies that I'm a convict, which I'm not. I've never actually been convicted of a crime, but I'm a recidivist in the sense that I went to jail a lot.
Right. Yeah, and I ended getting arrested and never getting convicted, but you're spending time until you get out on bail
6 months to
or whatever.
A year there. Yeah, like not a joke. You know, but knowing that there are guys listening that have probably done hard time, like I don't want to be like, oh, this guy did, 6 months to a year and is on here telling war stories. But it was Rikers in the 90s and it was pretty bad. And so anyway, I'm in here with these guys. And so it wasn't just, circling back, it wasn't just that these are dudes who aren't doing the stupid stuff like fighting. It was also, these are dudes who have made peace with their mistakes, taken ownership of their poor choices and have forgiven themselves and have adopted a mentality that if we're all sinners in the eyes of God, and you don't have to be a God person here. I mean, you can be a total atheist or agnostic or whatever, and I can find language, but to keep it simple, these are people who basically said, I sinned in the eyes of God, but also God created me to be a sinner so that I could have choice. So if I choose appropriately from here on in, then I'm doing the right thing. And if God is willing to forgive me, who am I to continue to crucify myself? That there's almost some arrogance in that.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's beautiful. So you felt, I mean, you saw the difference in the actions, but you also felt the difference in the energy and the beingness of these other guys that have come to peace with themselves.
Yeah. Well, so because I have this artistic talent, I made myself useful. I mean, I'll just shoot from the hip and say I was one of the only white guys in the house that I was in, and it was a top security. Like I was in with the scariest of the scaries. These guys were not in there for stealing gum, and these were dudes who respected me because I brought value to the house by being able to draw and write. And so I would draw pictures. I would literally do portraits of these guys on their letters and stationery for them to send to their wives and kids. And the way that I would draw them, they would look beautiful because I didn't see a prisoner. I saw a guy, and as an artist, that's a God-given gift. So I'm seeing without prejudice. And I became a mirror in which people liked seeing themselves. And when their families would get that, it would be just kind of uplifting. Like, wow, there's still some soul in your life. You're going through a hellish period, but you're not in hell because there's still soul, there's still love, there's still hope. So it was my artistic ability that gave me value and let me sit at the table with these lions, these kings. And in their space, I learned that I can either be a self-defeating person or I can take ownership. And as Paul Bear Bryant of Alabama famously said, if you make a mistake, you do three things. One, you admit it. Two, you learn from it. And three, you don't repeat it. And so that became my MO.
Yeah. And I'll say, and if you do repeat it, you go back to step one.
You go back to step one.
That's just another mistake.
It is what it is, right? Yeah. Brush your shoulders off, forgive yourself. You're human, and just be stubborn, and eventually you will format a new, you'll carve some new neural pathways to replace the ones that you had. So as far as transition goes, that was probably the bottom of the squat for me.
Right. Exactly. At that point, when you could feel this different energy by connecting with these guys, by doing their portraits, if you will,
and taking ownership of my own, like, knock it off and stop blaming the world for your behavior and take responsibility for your opportunity, as you said, to make choices in that gap between the signal and the noise. Somewhere between I broke a bottle and cut a guy's throat and face, somewhere between the choice to pick up the bottle and me being here in jail, there might have been a voice, an opportunity to say, what are you feeling right now?
Right.
I'm feeling hostility. What do you want to do? I want to hurt this person. Is that best?
Right.
No, maybe it's not. Right. Is there an alternative? Yeah, walk away, dude.
Right. Yeah, going back to your improv teacher, right?
Yeah.
That if you could, there is, in every millisecond, there is a gap, and you can choose at any millisecond to do something different.
Yeah.
And this, by being in prison, and the example on both sides of the people that you saw there, you started to make that choice.
Correct.
To quit playing a victim and to start choosing something different in the moment.
And to realize that I had the power to choose, because we have a tendency to say, a lot of the guys that I work with cannot separate the idea of a thought and a feeling,
mm-hmm. Yep.
nor can they separate the idea of a reaction and an emotion. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So, classic example, guy says, I screamed the F bomb in front of my kid because I stubbed my toe.
Right.
No, you stubbed your toe. It gave you an intense physical sensation.
Right.
You have a narrative that says, I'm a victim. And then you have a learned response because someone taught you this is what you do in that situation.
Right. Yep.
But if I tell you to take the one chip challenge, you're going to eat the hot chip. And even though the Scoville units are going to be a lot greater than whatever you felt when you banged your toe, because you're in control in that situation, now you're going to have laughter as a response rather than victim energy. And you're going to have you're demonstrating that you can choose how you respond to that stimulus.
Right.
So my job is to get people to recognize a lot of the quote emotions that you have. Well, when you emote, it's a verb. Just because you felt the feeling doesn't mean that you have an obligation to choose to emote what you've learned to emote. You can choose something different. And that's, I think, where the rubber meets the road. And it was at that point when I recognized you have the power to choose that I stopped becoming a victim and I started practicing self-mastery.
And what did that look like for you right in that moment? Because that's the tipping point, right? That was, as you said, the bottom of the squat. What shifted in your behavior? Like if I was recording you in the cell, in the jail, what shifted in your behavior? What would I see on a camera? And then maybe what I couldn't see in your feelings, but what shifted in your behavior from that point on?
Discipline. First thing I did is I said, I'm going to get a job here so that I can be in with people who are working and therefore have money in their commissary and therefore have stuff. So it's not so lean and hungry in here. So the first thing I did is I got into a workhouse. The next thing I did is once I was in the workhouse, it was a bunch of, black guys and Puerto Ricans and Dominicans and Mexicans who all had solid hustle. So being an Italian, I'm like, I'm going to work rings around these guys so that they have respect for me. So I came in and I didn't just go to the jail to do my little job. I made sure everybody was like, yo, no one works harder than Dennis. Immediate respect.
Right.
I made sure that I kept my cell clean to model that I'm not a scrub. I made sure that I kept my body clean so that my feet or breath or whatever weren't blowing people out. I made sure that I stayed coiffed. Even though I was going bald at the time in my 20s, I still made sure that I went to the barber with the other guys and kept clean looking just to radiate to other people self-respect. So I developed, I got really on the exercise thing. When they would do push-ups and burpees and squats, I would do push-ups and burpees and squats. And
who were this when you said they? Who were the they?
A group of people who were committed to exercising regularly.
So there's some people in your house that are working out and you just join them.
There are some people who are doing a sleeping bid, as it were, and they're just going to sleep away. And then there are some people who are carping the DM and they're doing burpees and push-ups and squats. And I got on board with those guys.
Right.
And there was also a Christian group that would have morning prayer, and there were also the Muslims who would go to the masjid. And it's funny because I'm a Catholic Jew, so I was more aligned to the Christian language, but I just really liked the Muslims, man. And I was like, all right, let's learn something new, So I started doing it all. I was like, do I seem like a double agent if I do both? They're like, nah, man. And so I did. I would practice. When the Christians would have morning prayer, I'd have morning prayer with them. When the Muslims would study Quran and go to masjid, I'd do that with them. And then when I wasn't doing that, I played a lot of chess because I thought that chess was like really a good way to practice my problem solving skills. And I got really good at chess. And I learned that if I had any downtime, I should spend it meditating. And so I did a lot of meditation.
And where did you learn that from, Dennis?
So I was raised in the 70s, right? My mom was something of a hippie. So, we were down with the Hare Krishnas and the going to ashrams and stuff. So I was no stranger to that. But I was also raised in churches ranging from me being an altar boy to me being whisked off to black church with my mom because she had a sort of a Rachel Dolezal thing going on where she thought we were honorary black people. So I ended up like in these super, super, super holy, spiritual, evangelistic churches where we were the only white folks. And I got my blast of soul power, and I was like, I don't know if the whole Jesus story and all this is like literal or not, but I know something's going on in here.
Right.
Like they are
There's
raising the roof,
energy,
and there is energy lifting the roof off of this thing. And so somewhere along the way, when I started drawing all the time as a what you would say in spectrum terms, because my son is autistic, so I have all that language under my belt. I would self-regulate and deal with my intense anxiety at the gunshots I was hearing outside, or the neighbor beating his wife upstairs, or hearing my parents fighting and knowing that at any point somebody could come in and beat me up as an extension of a drunken bender or whatever. So I would like hide in my whatever safe space I had, and I would draw. Well, when you draw for hours at a time, it's less about what you're drawing, and it's less product oriented and more process oriented.
Right.
So I was like, oh, well, this is what meditation is, because I would start to hit this. I don't know how to explain it, but I would just hit a different frequency.
Yeah.
I would just hit a different frequency.
That's a good way to put it. Instead of vibrating in a way that feels anxious and crazy and adrenalizing, it's a different frequency. Yeah.
And it's not only a frequency, it's a rhythmic frequency. And if you really, living in Pennsylvania where they've got the 33 on the back of the freaking, Rolling Rock bottle, the Latrobe PA, and all of the little secret Masonic signs that we grew up with, it was only a matter of time until I started checking out what the Masons were talking about, which led me to a curiosity about Hermetic concepts. And if you go back to a dude by the name of Hermes Trismegistus, this is a guy who was recognized as having laid down some very interesting principles, which are the principles of kind of how this whole thing works. Now, you could see that through the lens of a Christian and say, oh, that's occultist, or you could just see it through the lens of a curious person and say, I think that guy might have been onto something. So I choose to think that guy might have been onto something, and I recognize that there is rhythm and vibration in everything. And if you hit the right rhythm and you get the right vibration, you really get those Aquaman rings start coming out of your forehead and you start magnetizing. And so I learned that if I sat there and generated the right energy using my sketch pad as a power tool.
Yeah, as a mantra or power tool or whatever.
Yeah. Then all of a sudden, by some kooky coincidence, what goes around comes around, and things started to just look better. Years later, I would read the Celestine prophecies and all the Joseph Campbell stuff and the power of myth and all the old classics, The Secret, and everything that speaks to manifestation. And now we're really on the verge of accepting quantum consciousness as the ism. But in those days, I was a little kid with a pad of paper and a pen. And so when I was in jail, I already had the legal pads and the freaking felt tip pen for doing the art. So I would just use drawing simple patterns that didn't have any real, subjective content.
Right. Yeah. So it just takes you like a mantra, the process of focusing on your breath or whatever. You're focusing on this movement.
Like a mandala.
Or building, drawing a mandala. Yeah.
Yeah. So I would just do that. And the next thing you know, doors would open up.
Yeah.
And when I realized, oh my gosh, if you can do this in a survival situation, what would happen if you put the same level of intensity into doing this work when you're just in a maintenance mode rather than survival mode? And I was
Right.
like, that's how people achieve success.
Mm-hmm.
And then I decided to bottle it and sell it. And here I am now.
Right. So how old were you when you were in jail and had this epiphany?
20s.
20s.
Early
Okay.
20s. Early
and now
20s.
you're in your 50s, early 50s probably?
I'm 54. Mm-hmm.
54. So what would you like to go back and tell your early 20s self from the perspective that you have now?
I've thought about this a lot. And I was one of the most uncoachable people I knew at that time.
You're kidding, right?
Right.
You ended up in jail. I can't imagine you'd be uncoachable.
Right. I was too smart for my own good, and I had all the answers, which meant I wasn't receptive to any new information. So I was Mr. I got to learn the hard way. So if I could tell my earlier self anything, I would just say, bro, you're in for a rough ride, but it all works out.
So like relax a little bit. It's going to be bumpy, but it works out. Yeah.
And I would also say you're eventually going to quit drinking, but you could save some steps if you quit drinking sooner rather than later. Mm. That one took me a minute. It wasn't until my 30s that I finally got that message.
Mm. This episode of the Life in Transition podcast is brought to you by Transition Mastery Coaching. If you have made it to midlife and you're successful and you are going through transitions in your life, in your business, in your career, or in your organization, and you're looking to master those transitions, to make the most of them, to accelerate into the next phase of your organization or your life. If you're facing challenges in your business, challenges in your relationship, challenges in your health, and you really want to transition those quickly, I'm here to guide you for that. And I look forward to working with you. And you can sign up for either Pinnacle Transition Coaching or Summit. Please go to lifeintransition.online/MLTM and scroll to see the Summit and Pinnacle Coaching, or reach out to me directly on my email, art@artblanchford.com. And I look forward to connecting with you and helping you to accelerate your transitions to achieve what it is that you want to achieve in the second half in your organization and in your life, so you can live your whole life with no regrets. So where do you think your life would be now if you hadn't had that realization about your power to control a gap?
I have no idea. I mean,
do you think you'd still be alive today or not? To be very dramatic, but not really. I mean, this is an honest question.
I literally attempted suicide a couple of times and it didn't work. And on some of my weirder days, I'm like, maybe it did. Like maybe I'm just, maybe I'm, Bruce Willis in the freaking, whatever that movie was with the, where he sees red and he has to figure out through the movie that he's already died.
Yes.
Yeah. I can't remember the title of it, but you know the movie I'm talking about.
It's a little bit freaky movie, actually.
Yeah. Right. So I thought maybe in some moments I'm like, you tried a couple of times. How do you know it didn't work? And that you're not just living through some sort of post-death karma and having to resolve these problems so you can move on. And, so there was that thought. But assuming that that's not what happened and that life is literal and real the way Sixth Sense, that was the name of the movie, Sixth Sense. Right. Yep. Assuming that this is all literal and true, just the way science has laid it out to us, then I guess I would say if I hadn't had that, what I probably would have done is I would have continued making excuses for my poor choices. Mm-hmm. I would have continued doing despicable stuff that I felt was justified because of a sense of entitlement. And I know this because I've had clients who were on that path, and I'm like, dude, I see you. Like, I've been where you are.
Can you share a minute your wisdom on justification? Like, you brought up that word, and I think it's such a critical word when you're saying it, keep doing things that I felt was justified.
Yeah. So, I mean, hopefully, like, at the end of this, people aren't going to be like, that dude's a coach, he's a dick, but I'm just being vulnerable here and just telling them the
but
truth.
That's the point, right?
Yeah. So the reality is that I grew up deprived, at least that's the way I framed it, deprived of things that I saw that other people had. They had heat in the winter. I didn't. They had parents that didn't beat them. I didn't. They apparently weren't being sexually molested by freaking random predators. That wasn't my experience. And, they had clothes that didn't stink when they went to school. I didn't. Just like every stupid little, they had lunch money. I didn't, whatever. And so it's kind of like I was saying about Batman's origin story, it's kind of like the villain's origin story. I felt really deprived and really cheated and really kind of screwed over. And if we're being 100% honest, that often leads people to do some pretty heinous stuff.
So that justifies. So it's because it was taken from me, because I had all this shit done to me. Now I have
the right. Yeah, I have the right
to take mine to whatever it is. Yeah.
I'm going to punish people who have what I deserve. Yeah. I am going to look at everybody as an opportunity. They're holding my money. They're holding my girlfriend. They're holding everything that I deserve, and I'm going to take it with no regard. And it's bizarre because, one, you get really good at it because you have to be manipulative to be a survivor. And then two, you are a genius at justifying your poor decisions, which makes you pretty much sociopathic.
So the thing that I'm hearing here, and this matches my experience too, is that if you have to justify anything, don't do it. Like, full stop. Because as soon as you're justifying, then you're giving yourself permission to do something. You're giving yourself a reason. You're giving yourself an out. You're giving yourself an excuse to do something that at some level, some part of you knows you should not be doing.
Yeah, obviously, right? Like, I shouldn't do this, but
anything
after but's going to be a rationalization.
So that's this tipping point of this justification, is this rationalization. So whether you would be alive or not if you hadn't made this transition, we don't know. But there's
right. I mean, because it's like, I mean, I ask myself these questions all the time. Like, what would Bruce Jenner's life have been if he didn't decide to become move in that direction, right? To transition, right? Or what would Reverend Jesse Jackson's life have been if he had been born white or whatever? It's like, it's an interesting thought experiment, but the reality is, like, this is where I'm at, right? Going. So I'm just playing the cards I've been dealt.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. How has this transition that you've been through, like, how has it affected the quality of your relationships broadly? Like, family relationships, friend relationships, relationships in general?
I recorded a piece of content today for my business that said, I actually have it on this piece of paper.
Great.
It says, Spotless mirror. Okay. And it says projection versus reflection. And what I've learned about being a coach over the past, like, over a decade now, is that the best I can offer a client is to be a mirror of sorts in which they see themselves differently than they see themselves when they look at anybody else as a as a mirror for seeing themselves, or when they look within and are a victim of their own self-limiting dialogues.
Mm-hmm.
And so my concept of the spotless mirror that I have to be for my client is any self-judgment that I bring into a session becomes schmutz on the mirror that they're going to see, and they're going to see it on them.
Right.
So the process of becoming a better version of myself has been a subtractive process.
Right.
In
Absolutely.
which I am removing judgment. And for every time I remove judgment, whether it's judging myself or judging someone else, again, we're back to all judgment is self-judgment. Anytime I remove judgment by replacing it with forgiveness, love, acceptance, compassion, all the stuff you would do for your own kid, in a best case scenario. And we're back. Again, yeah. right. But in a best case scenario, like a good dad starts by fathering his own inner child.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And so the fathering of my own inner child is going back and it's cleaning the schmutz off the mirror and saying, just because this has been here doesn't mean I need to keep it here. And so how it's affected my relationships is that I don't project my crap onto other people. And they are a person in my mirror that they feel validated when they interact with me.
Mm-hmm. So they can see themselves in you because you're not looking to be solved by them or validated by them. You're not judging them.
They're like, every time I hang out with this person, this guy is always really nice to me, has nothing but validating things to say. I enjoy being around this person. And when I argue for my limitations by going, why are you always so freaking nice? Don't you realize how stupid I am and what a bum I am or whatever? I refuse to support their prejudices. And I'm like, nah, I'm not seeing that. I'm seeing a good dude. Yeah. And eventually they'll argue with me, but they'll still follow me around.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's great. That's great. Yeah. If you could give one tool to our listeners right now, Dennis, like somebody that's struggling, whether they've made all the wrong choices or they've just had this epiphany about recognizing that they have a gap, right? Or whether they're in a place where they're thinking about taking their own life. But if somebody's struggling and you could give them one tool that they can hit pause on this podcast right now and do that's going to make a difference for them, what would that be?
When I was at the lowest of my lows, more than anything else, the message "don't give up" was huge to me. And I imagined that there was a just sky full of angels encouraging me that weren't allowed to interfere, but that were saying, come on, dude, you've come so far. Don't give up. And if I could give the listener any tool right now, the tool would be, even though you don't realize the tremendous amount of support that you have because you're not seeing it, we're all here and we're waiting for you. Don't give up, man. Grind. Yeah.
Pull through, because we're waiting for your genius, for your gift, for your joy that you're going to ground and bring into the world.
Yeah, you don't see your value right now. Right. You're seeing yourself through a very self-critical lens.
Right.
But I would urge you to practice meditation, which means just sit the hell still and look at a wall, dude. It's not any more complicated than that. Sit still and shut up, which is really a lot harder than it seems for somebody who's a victim of momentum and just inertia. So one would be don't get lost in what meditation means.
Right.
Literally sit down, look at a wall, and do that for 30 minutes to 2 damn hours a day. And Dennis said, do that. That's why.
Right.
And
Yeah.
right. A master coach said, do this.
Right.
Don't
Right.
Google meditation.
Right.
Should I do Taoist meditation or transcendental meditation, or just look at a wall for 20 minutes to an hour or so every day? That's not, and shut your mouth. And the second thing, be still. And the second thing that I would say, meditation and validations. You'll notice that I don't use the term affirmation because guys, for some reason, don't connect with affirmation because it sounds like confirmation. And they're like, if I could confirm my own value, we wouldn't be here. I think I'm a piece of garbage. Like, what did you miss? So validation is kind of like the difference between telling your son, he should have tried harder at the baseball game and he wouldn't have struck out, or telling your son, hey, I'm glad you had fun out there. Let's go get ice cream with sprinkles. It's all about having fun. You're awesome. You need to tell yourself, you need to validate yourself and tell yourself all the time, you're awesome, you're awesome, you're awesome. Even if you don't believe it, what you order the most is what's coming out of the kitchen.
That's
so
right.
The tool would be, one, know that we're here waiting for you. Don't give up.
Right.
You can't see us, but we see you. We're waiting for you at the finish line so that you can help us to help other guys. Because don't think you get off easy here. Once you figure this out, now we're going to put you to work.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah,
what you need. That's the purpose, right? We talked about it at the beginning.
You're healed? Great. Now get on the front lines because we have work to do.
That's right.
2, meditate. 3, validate. Those are that's the emergency package.
Nice. Don't give up. Meditate. Spend some quiet time. If you're thinking about taking a bad action, take no action. Before I do something, I do nothing. I sit there and meditate and spend some time, and then validate. And I want to add one little piece to that validation is to, even if you, or maybe especially if you catch yourself doing a really bad thing, validate, hey, I caught it.
Yep.
I noticed it.
This is what I always do with my guys. I always say redirect. You catch yourself eating a sandwich you weren't supposed to be eating, put it down, and then go about your business. Say,
but to celebrate the catch instead of beat yourself up because you did something bad.
You located the impulse.
Yeah, exactly. I was talking with a client about that earlier session today. That's really great. No, that's awesome. I love the conversation here, Dennis. I want to know, you have so much obviously going on in your business and so forth. Where can people connect with you? If they want to find out more, where can they connect with you?
So my coaching practice, which is Man Up Life Coaching,
which I just couldn't help but notice the Man Up coach is writing their notes on the pink Post-it notes. So I just like that,
right. Hey man, you know what? I'm man enough to rock pink, amigo. No. It's funny because I also recorded a piece of content today that said macho is for betas. And it goes into the idea that real men, I don't care if you're a fireman or a policeman or a freaking Navy SEAL or whatever, real men understand that you're not a real man until you can father a daughter. And fathering a daughter does not use any of the things that guys think makes you macho. You need to be really kind of need to be a lover, not a fighter. So Man Up Life Coaching is a double entendre. On one hand, it shames you into getting your life together, but on the other, man up because we're into ascension, and man down is a problem. And if you're down, we're all here to help. Brotherly love, man, Philly.
Yeah,
So
manupLifeCoaching.com.
So here for people with a short attention span, you can go to malelifecoach.com because I've been around that long.
Right.
But either go to manupLifeCoaching.com or malelifecoaching.com and check me out, read some of the stuff, and if you're interested, push the candy red button and we can talk.
Awesome. No, I really appreciate that. Dennis, I appreciate your energy and your heart for serving others, right? To really, as you said, once you get to a place where you're healed enough to be on the front line, which by the way, the healing continues while you're on the front line, that, you're needed. And that's the purpose in the second half that you talked about, that you're passionate about helping helping men do. So I love the way you showed up. I love the vulnerability. I love the authenticity and the way that you're, got a heart to be on the front line and helping everybody else, helping all of us through that. So thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you. And thanks for having a platform like this that, relays this energy out there into the world, because people need it. And I think you're doing God's work, man. So thanks for having me.
Thank you, brother. I can't wait to hear what action you are taking. Connect with me on LinkedIn or our website, lifeintransition.online, and let me know. Let a friend know too. It could be a huge encouragement to them and keep you on the track. Thank you so much for joining me today. Make sure you subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts, and it would mean a lot to me if you left a review and shared this episode with a friend. If you want to learn more about me and what I do when I'm not podcasting, please visit me at artblanchford.com. Thank you for listening. Together, let's make the most of life in transition.